I'm sorry that I've had a little interruption in doing the video quiet times, but we're back up and ready to go. And got a great way of starting today. Our devotion today is called Temptation Island. A friend of mine shared a story with me this morning that I thought was hilarious. He told me about this mother who had told her little boy not to go swimming. However, when the little boy came home and came into the house, his mother noticed that his hair was wet and his bathing suit was wet. So the mom said, "I told you not to go swimming." And the little boy looked and said, "But Mom, I couldn't help it. The water looked so good." Then the mama asked him, "Well, son, why did you take your bathing suit with you?" And the little boy innocently replied, "Well, just in case I got tempted, Mama." I thought that was hilarious. Now, that little boy is so helpful to us in learning how to deal with temptation. That little boy reveals a lot about many of us. We're more prepared in case we get tempted than we are prepared to avoid temptation. Some of you may remember back in the 1980s, Nancy Reagan, the First Lady of the United States, popularized the slogan, "Just say no." You remember that? It was simple and straightforward, but those two letters that make up that word, N-O, are the right thing to say, but often the most difficult thing to say. When you're on a diet and you walk past that all-you-can-eat buffet, it's hard to say no. Or if you're committed to never maxing out your credit card again, but they're having a 40% off sale at your favorite store, it's hard to say no. Or you're just about to give in to that pet sin. Oh yeah, you know the one I'm talking about. It can be difficult to just say no. And in fact, sometimes we don't just say no. How do you say no to temptation? James, the half-brother of Jesus, wrote in his book, in the latter part of the New Testament, in chapter 1, verses 14 through 15, he said, "Temptation comes from our own desires, which entice us and drag us away. These desires give birth to sinful actions. And when sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death." James tells us how temptation works. You see, it starts with just our natural human desires. These are just things that we want in life, and they're generally good, and it's okay. However, here's what Satan does. He comes and plays on those desires, and he tries to get us to satisfy those desires in illegitimate ways, or he attempts to exploit those desires in our lives. Here's where sin and wrong takes place. When we allow natural desires to determine our actions and run our lives. See, when my desires are in charge of my mind, instead of my mind being in charge of my desires, I get in trouble. It's often been said that desire that is out of control leads to sin. That is why James described it like this. We get dragged away by our desires. We get pulled away from doing the right thing when desires are unbridled and uncontrolled. And then the inevitable happens. It's what James says. These desires give birth to sinful actions. What starts in my head and heart makes its way into my hands and actions. This is where bad habits come from. We start doing things that may be fine in the first place, or may be fine if we do them in the right place with the right people under the right circumstances. But when those desires begin to control us, they tend to dominate us. And we get dominated by our desires, and they control our actions. That's when we say things like, "I just have to have it," or "I just have to do it." Our mind's no longer in control, but our appetites are. The problem is, this is not the end of the game. James says the next step is this. When sin is allowed to grow, when we let this happen, it gives birth to death. The whole reason that God says appetites and desires are to be under control, is that if they're not, if they're left unbridled, they become killers. Bad habits can turn into bad character, and bad character can kill. It kills reputations, it kills relationships, and it destroys lives. So we need to learn a lesson from the little boy. If you're trying not to go swimming, then for goodness sake, leave the bathing suit at home. Better yet, stay away from the water. If you know you're weak in a certain area, or if you know you have a tendency to let a particular desire control you, then don't put yourself in a position where that desire gets fueled and the potential for giving in exists. Guard yourself from that temptation. A little word of announcement here. For those of you in Crosswater Community Church, our new summer semester of small groups is starting. I've just taught and put on video a brand new series entitled Grow Up. It's a study of the book of James. One of the 8 sessions that I teach in this Grow Up series is on how to avoid and how to overcome temptation. Let me encourage you to join a small group this Sunday. Here's a thought for today. It's a little different, but think about it. Leave your bathing suit at home. And then here's a prayer for today. God, help me not to be led into temptation. Help me to keep my desires under the control of your Spirit so that I don't let them dominate me. God bless you today.